Well, greetings vinyl community and welcome to VC Friday. This week I'll be talking about some records I picked up on a buying trip to Oakland last week, and I visited two shops that are close to each other, Stranded and Grooveyard. Two shops with very well curated collections of used records. You won't find dollar bin stuff at either shop, but very different in vibe. Stranded is a very open, well-lit store. They're pretty much evenly split between new and used inventory, and they have their own label, Superior Viaduct, so a lot of stuff, very interesting stuff on that label is available. Prices are on the high side. Their cheap records are $10. Grooveyard is very different proposition. It's a long, narrow room with record bins on one side, record bins on the other side, and a double bin running down the middle, and about this much space in between. So you kind of have to sidle in sideways to do any shopping. In addition, there are huge piles of random records just plopped on top of the bins. So a lot of stuff is difficult to access, and it's an amazing shop because they have a great inventory and fair prices. It's a jazz-oriented store, but has also a very interesting rock section and some other items. There is a blues section towards the door and also a section of more expensive records, and these were completely inaccessible on this past trip because they were just covered with a mountain of unsorted records piled on top that was so precarious I didn't want to touch it because it might trigger off an avalanche. Worth going to, but not the easiest shopping experience. So I'll start with the one record I picked up at Stranded, and this is one that's that I've had my eye out for some time. It is Electronic Dreams by Edgar Froese. The late Edgar Froese, formerly the main man of Tangerine Dream. And this is a compilation from 1979 of material from Froese's first two solo albums, which are almost indistinguishable from actual Tangerine Dream albums. The first, Aqua, we have two of the tracks from Aqua making up side one of the compilation. And side two is from the second album, Epsilon in Malaysian Pale, these albums being from 1974 and 75 respectively. Side one is Panorphilia and Upland from Aqua, and side two, this is the big attraction for me. The reason I would buy the compilation is Maroubra Bay, full side piece from Epsilon in Malaysian Pale, which consists of just two side-long pieces. And what's remarkable about the version of Maroubra Bay on this LP is that it's mastered completely backwards. And because it's purely electronic music, that's not really obvious. So I don't think it's known why that happened, why the entire track is backwards, but there it is. So you get the reverse mix of Maroubra Bay, 17 minutes, 15 seconds on the album Electronic Dreams. Now moving on to the finds from Grooveyard, I'll start with this 1984 album by Holger Czukay of Cannes. Der Osten ist rot, or The East is Red. This is on the Virgin label, and features Holger Czukay on dictaphone, vocals, guitar, bass, and organ. And as with most of his solo items, he's joined by his Cannes compatriot Jackie Liebetzeit on drums, harmonium, trumpet, piano, and organ. And also on the album is Connie Plank on synthesizers. And the personnel is rounded out by two single-named participants, Michi on vocals, female vocals, and organ, and Gandhi on telephone and news. Now, the fact that telephone, dictaphone, and news are credited as instruments gives you the idea that this album uses some funny spoken word sampling ideas, and that's very central to Holger Czukay's post-Cannes concept. This album is very funny in some of the text that it uses, which is, I think, all in German, but there are translations provided on the inner sleeve and some stuff on the back cover notes as well. There we have Holger Czukay with Gandhi, and Michi and Doggy, as well as Connie Plank and Jackie Liebetzeit. The album opens with a very bouncy pop song, the Photo Song, and progressively goes more in an avant-garde and experimental direction with, as mentioned, a lot of these very wacky vocal contributions, and eventually becomes very ambient and atmospheric. So there's a real progression in sound with the title track, Der Osten ist Rot, The East is Red, right in the middle at the beginning of side 2, being an adaptation of the Chinese Communist anthem. Very adapted, something that I think the chairman would not necessarily have approved of.
Looking through a photograph, giving everybody fun, facing the locality, images melt into one. Fun is the key to your health, turning pictures to your heart, facing the locality, images melt into one.
Wurde am Boden zerstört. Räder müssen rollen für den Sieg. Ciao.
Es folgen weitere Nachrichten aus dem Nahen Osten. Palästinenser Führer Yasser Arafat erhielt eine Privataudienz beim Heiligen Vater.
The next album is another one that I've had my eye out for quite some time, but especially since Cleo Laine passed away last July, and that is Cleo Laine's recording of Schoenberg's Pierrot Lunaire, something very off the beaten path for Dame Cleo. I've shown a couple of versions of Pierrot Lunaire on the channel before, but this is the first one that's sung in English. And of course, the poems originally were written by Albert Giraud in French and set in German translation by Schoenberg. And here we have an English version that I think makes it a lot more accessible for maybe the entry-level Schoenberg listener. Interestingly, though, it does come with a text sheet. But I notice in following the text sheet that Cleo Laine doesn't follow it precisely. There are a lot of discrepancies between what's in the printed text and what she actually sings. And I find that a little mysterious. A lot of it is really trivial stuff, like a that, which might be changed to which. But one that particularly struck me is in the 11th poem, Red Mass. There is a line, he shows to frightened people the dripping crimson wafer. The words frightened people are actually sung as awestruck mortals on the record. So that's a pretty significant change, and I don't know what that's about. Red Mass and a dripping crimson wafer. Pierrot Lunaire, of course, being a primary example of Sprechstimme, or speak singing, is very centered around its poetic origins. So at least as much about the poems as about the actual music. So in the poetry, there is a lot of color symbolism and red and blood. There's a lot of red and blood. There's a lot of black and night, and there's a lot of white and the moon.
The wine which through the eyes we drink flows nightly from the moon in torrents, and as the springtide overflows the far and distant land.
And Pierrot Lunaire consists of settings of 21 poems divided up into 3 sets of 7 songs. So it's a little tricky to divide it up for a record because you don't really want to divide up the sets. So this one has the first 2 sets, so 14 songs on side 1. Side 2 has only the 3rd set, and so it's filled out with 3 songs by Charles Ives. Very nice companion piece to Pierrot Lunaire there. We have The Greatest Man by Ives with text by Anne Collins. Ives' adaptation of the hymn Shall We Gather at the River, and The Circus Band with text by Ives himself.
Horses are prancing, knights advancing, helmets gleaming, pennants streaming, Cleopatra's on her throne, that golden hair is on. Her own horses are prancing, knights advancing, helmets gleaming, pennants streaming, Cleopatra's on her throne, that golden hair is on her own.
So in contrast to the French, German, English of the Schoenberg, with Ives we get pure American.
Shall we gather at the river, where bright angel feet have trod, with its crystal tide forever, flowing by the throne of God.
So it seems like I've been showing a lot of Albert Ayler on the channel lately, and here's another one. My Name is Albert Ayler. Recordings made for Danish radio in 1963 and released here in 1965 on the Fantasy label. And there is that label. This is kind of an odd version of the album in that there's supposed to be a spoken introduction. It's credited on the cover, introduction by Albert Ayler, 1 minute 20 seconds. That's not on here. Also, the sides are mislabeled, so introduction by Albert Ayler is shown as the first track on side 1, but the music on this side is side 2, and the side 2 label is on side 1, so very, very confusing. But once you get into the actual music, which fades in, it fades in on the first track, which is Bye Bye Blackbird. Yes, this is an album of Albert Ayler with essentially a pickup band. He's got Niels Bronsted on piano, Niels Henning Orsted Pedersen, great Danish bassist, and Ronnie Gardner on drums. And he's playing standards. So Albert Ayler playing Bye Bye Blackbird, Billy's Bounce, Summertime, On Green Dolphin Street, and just one original CT dedicated to Cecil Taylor. I think it's really interesting to hear Ayler playing under the constraint of working within standards changes and working with a band that's kind of expecting to play standard jazz while Ayler is just wanting to howl. And he does a lot of retreating in here. He plays some sort of, it sounds like kind of muttering the actual melodies while waiting for a chance to just go into wild howls in the night, to go into the real Albert Ayler identity. So I think some people feel that this is not a completely successful album. I think it's a really fascinating one. I mean, I love these tunes, and I love to hear what somebody whose whole concept is not about this music handles the constraint of working with this music. This is also a mono pressing. So it's one of those that's got the little stereo on the part that gets folded over. Couldn't find this exact version on Discogs with the introduction missing, and it's mono, and it's the original 65 Fantasy label. The missing introduction is actually common on a lot of pressings, so there you go. Don't know what he actually said. It'll forever be a mystery. The next album is also a release from 1965, and it is on the Atlantic label, Charlie Mingus. I always understood he hated being called Charlie. Charles Mingus, Tonight at Noon. And this is one of that run of 4 albums on Atlantic that have this kind of very painty Marvin Israel artwork. They all have this look. There was this album, and I've been looking at this again, an album I've really been looking out for so I can complete my collection. There's the Sonny Stitt album, Stitt Plays Bird, and of course there's the John Coltrane album, Coltrane's Sound. The one I'm missing is a Milt Jackson album. These all have consecutive catalog numbers. The Mingus is 1416, and the others are 1418 and 1419, so the Milt Jackson must be 1417. But I didn't really realize until seeing this one in my own hands that these are painted over photographs. It's pretty obvious on this one because the ear, the original photographed ear is quite clear and the original photographed mouth is quite clear. Not as completely covered up as on, say, this one. Now, by 1965, Mingus had left Atlantic Records and moved on to Impulse. So this was a release of leftovers from two previous Mingus albums on Atlantic. The first and last tracks, the title track Tonight at Noon and Passions of a Woman Loved, are leftovers from the album The Clown, recorded in 1957. These feature Shafi Hadi as the saxophone player, Jimmy Knepper on trombone, Mingus playing bass, Wade Legg on piano, and the stalwart Danny Richmond on drums. In between, the other three tracks are leftovers from 1961's Oh Yeah, and we have Invisible Lady, Old Blues for Waltz Torin, and Peggy's Blue Skylight. And these are played with Mingus on piano and the bass being handled by Doug Watkins. Jimmy Knepper again is on trombone. This time two sax players, Roland Kirk and Booker Irvin. That's something that's not to be sneezed at. And of course Danny Richmond on drums. Great playing, especially from the saxophone players here on both sessions. Although the guy who really gets featured on the track Invisible Lady, that whole track is basically a showcase for Jimmy Knepper's trombone. So there you go. It's not like Mingus is hogging the spotlight. He's got some great players, as he always did, and he makes very strong use of them. Moving on to the free improvisation arena, I found this album of 1977 recordings by Pierre Favre and Andrea Centazzo, both drummers, playing on the album Dialogues. And this is an original on the Italian Ictus label, and I found this sealed. So a brand new copy, maybe a little bit of rumpling around the corners of the cover, but a pristine LP from 1977 of very exploratory drumming, but you know, with free improvisation featuring just the two drummers, there's going to be more rhythmic stability than you often get in free improv records. Still, there's some pretty cute and out there and spacey percussion work, which I kind of tried to highlight in the needle drop that's coming next. And finally, this 1974 release of 1970 recordings by Peter Warren. It's not really clear from the front cover that it's a Peter Warren album. He is given 6th billing in the list of participants. Bass is. But this is essentially an improvising quartet of bass players. Side 1 features Peter Warren on bass, Glenn Moore from Oregon on bass, Jaime or Jamie Font on bass, and Dave Holland on bass. And towards the end of the side, there's some drumming. We've got Steve House on drums and Stu Martin on drums. On side 2, they are joined by John Sermon on baritone sax, Chick Corea on piano. So there's a more filled out sound, but still with the 4 bass players creating those layers. Not necessarily all in the low register, because of course there's so much that a bass can do, and a bass can play, high melodies way up on the fingerboard. A bass can do the standard bass thing of providing a support. So there's a lot of back and forth happening among the different bass players. It's just a really interesting concept. Apparently having Barry Altschul, I forgot Barry Altschul, on tabla and drums. Having him and Chick Corea has to do with them coming over from a Circle session. Circle being the band with Chick Corea, Barry Altschul, Dave Holland, and Anthony Braxton. So I'm not sure why Braxton is not on here, but John Sermon is, so it's all good. So that's another week's VC Friday done and dusted. Thanks very much for watching. Be well. Don't forget to eat your spinach, and I'll talk with you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Are you sure you're in love with him?
Sure, I'm sure. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I see his face in front of me all the time. In the beef stew, in the asparagus, even in the spinach. Joan, I keep kissing the spinach, and when you kiss spinach, you're in love.